that moment, he heard it. A low, slow, and deadly pulsation emanated from some nameless deep. A sound like some alien war machine gradually coming to life, or like a colossus drawing breath. Ulrica. He murmured the name as sparse bubbles escaped from his breathing apparatus. This German U-boat had a reputation that sent a pale cast of thought. But as an enemy, its existence had only ever been confirmed through intercepted telegrams. Those who had witnessed it were either doomed in prisoner of war camps or had perished in a fish's belly. After leaping into the sea from the submarine, now destined to sink to the ocean floor, his world was swallowed by darkness. The only light came from the dying glow of distant explosions, flickering like a moribund jellyfish before fading into the abyss. The only sound echoing in his mind was the final command from the bridge. Abandon ship. Voice torn apart by static before plunging into a deathly silence. All other signals had vanished. Surrounding him was nothing but darkness, with the sea like an invisible hand caressing his diving suit and whispering secrets. He held his breath, hands clutching the oxygen tank as he carefully adjusted buoyancy, attempting to hide like a ghost fish. Before a torpedo struck the submarine, the radar had detected an unknown thermal signature drifting like a shadow. The next instant, the vessel's pressure hull was breached. Its pneumatic systems failed and he dashed towards the escape capsule. This can only be Ulrica, they whispered day and night at the military base, steeped in terror for this leader of the wolf pack. He adjusted his course, descending slightly as he swam towards a sea cloud, endeavoring to put as much distance as possible between himself and that low thumping. Yet no matter how he altered his direction, that sound followed him still. His oxygen should last a little over 2 hours. If he could wait until Ulrica departed, he might reduce the risk of capture by enemy vessels. All meaning amid his flight. He attempted to hide within the rusted wreckage of a sunken ship. Curling up in a corner of the captain's cabin, He checked again his oxygen supply, worrying that his mounting fear and heartbeats were accelerating its consumption. When he once again reached for the pressure valve, he instead encountered a heavy, solid object pressed against his waist. A coin purse. Startled, he opened the pouch. Dozens of coins flickered slowly like fireflies down to the dark seabed. He recognized them as silver cruzados, coins from before the 18th century, a form of currency he had once seen during a clandestine meeting at the Lisbon Naval Museum. Soon, he discovered that the coin purse was not the sole item in that pocket. It was the pocket of a navigator from the Age of Discovery. A hypothesis stirred inside him. Suppressing his fear, he reached for the last object. The linen pages were falling to pieces, yet even so, he had no trouble discerning the date of each entry, July 1582. At that moment, he felt an unusual serenity. The sound of Ulrica still reverberated, but he seemed to have found an answer. He recalled the savage anti-submarine warfare and the disaster-ravaged Europe lying 1,000 miles away. Underwater, the ghostly light made the roaming shoals of sea wolves and the silent rust appear as if they were growing out of his very body, that his doomed flesh had become part of its keel. He felt the time he spent at the ocean's depths was no longer measurable by minutes following the explosion, but rather more than 3 centuries had passed. Upon entering the wreck, he passed into another man's twilight zone, belonging to a navigator who once lived in the age of dynasties, serving under the Portuguese crown. His vessel sank to the ocean's floor and struck by Spanish cannons. His wandering spirit kept silent vigil among those corroded coins, while the generations of Atlantic octopus, moray eel, and dog shark rose and fell. For a solitary escapee from a sinking submarine, the promised reality of the world had become an unreachable phantom. Yet it now clung to the diver as the fate of another suffering soul. Perhaps 300 years ago, this soldier on his deathbed, lungs filled with seawater, had also witnessed the explosion of a submarine and heard the pulse of Ulrica. He felt a foreign object strike the inner side of his thigh, a sacred token. The moment the fingers touched it, he heard once more the last fragment from the navigator's life. fallen silent, he heard it once more. A low, slow, and deadly pulsation. Ulrica. He no longer cared to discern whether this pulsation belonged to the era of the navigator, or the German U-boat was still lying in wait outside. Noticing his oxygen had dropped to a dangerous level, he had to begin his ascent. His vision began to blur. Oxygen deprivation silently eroded his senses. He became lost within the cave. The route he laid out had vanished. Ulrica's noise continued, and he no longer felt fear. He even began to wonder if he had misheard. Perhaps this sound was not that of an enemy, but merely the ancient ear ringing of the navigator in his own mind. The needle on his oxygen gauge dropped below the red warning line. The dazzle before his eyes thickened, gradually swirling into a soft vision. When he began breathing again, he found himself in an impenetrable darkness. Yet his hearing had never been so acute. Every cavity within his body vibrated in unison, and he sensed that Ulrica was right nearby. Its sound spread through space like a velvet bed stretching into the depths of a bedroom. In the cold blue beam, his vision slowly illuminated a fleeting glimpse. As he continued to scan, first an expanse of gray, then Ulrica was a whale. He swam toward its body. With each beat of its heart, he became utterly convinced that he recognized in it the very U-boat from which he had so desperately tried to escape. He looked up and, miraculously, discovered the water's surface was within reach. A strange force, like a summons, pulled him upward. Standing on a shoal. He struck as he understood Ulrica was beached. The familiar pulsation conversation he had come to depend on was fading, and behind him lay that motionless, sand-laden whale.